daughter of a tenant and impoverished, driven by a providence, inspiration for the nation, catalyst for loyalties to spark. Welcome, folks, it's Joan of Arc! Yep, everyone's favorite fighting Frenchman was a French woman who may or may not have actually fought. Joan d'Arc, called Joan of Arc, was born in Domremy Bar, France in 1412, to a poor tenant and his wife, Jacques d'Arc and Isabelle Romier. As a girl in the 15th century, she did what everyone else like her could do. She took care of her family's animals, became a skilled seamstress, and had divine visions from God when she was 13. Yeah. She was well acquainted with Catholic teachings, but these kinds of things are bound to scare anyone. As she grew up, the visions became more vivid until she was visited by Saint Michael, Saint Catherine, and Saint Margaret themselves, declaring her the savior of France and encouraging her to seek audience with the Dauphin Charles, who was destined to be king. Which is, a bit much, for an illiterate, uneducated teenager at least. Regardless, she was devout, and followed the path set out for her. Joan is instructed to leave for Vaucouleurs and request a meeting with the Dauphin via the garrison commander, Baudricourt, who initially refused her the escorts she needed to make the journey. However, the people were in her favor, and he eventually relented. Joan left with a horse, a team of soldiers, and a whole new look that she'd keep for the rest of her life. Okay, not very long, but let's not discuss that right now. Charles was unsure of what to do about Joan, a peasant girl claiming divine providence, but allowed her an audience wherein he disguised himself as one of his court members, testing her. To everyone's shock, Joan was able to identify him regardless. She requested accompaniment of the army in Orleans, saying that she could make him king, and, against his advisors, Charles allowed Joan to fight. Joan traveled to Orleans and proved to be an incredible force on the offensive front. She rallied the army and, though receiving injury at one point, led a series of battles successfully. After a victory in Orleans, Joan encouraged Charles to hurry to Reims to be crowned, which he eventually did despite initial hesitance, with Joan at his side during the ceremony. She gained much renown in the eyes of other people, and even had her family ennobled by Charles as a reward. Eventually, Charles ordered Joan to confront the Burgundian threat in Compiègne. We can effectively call this portion of her life unfortunate. Following a series of pursuits, a battle was instigated wherein Joan was thrown from her horse, some say due to an archer's influence, and was left outside of the town gates. After surrendering, the Burgundians took her captive for several months, where she'd made multiple attempts at escape, before exchanging Joan to the English for 10,000 francs, who felt she held value as a propaganda prize. The English kept Joan in a secular prison guarded by soldiers in Rouen, and the trial conducted against her was, by many means, complete bullshit. Bishop Couchon, who initiated the trial, lacked jurisdiction to begin it, and the lack of evidence violated inquisitorial law. Joan was denied the right to a legal advisor, and the tribunal was filled with pro-English clergy. Everyone was against her. Regardless, Joan was able to outwit them in their interrogation, baffling her captors. Joan was charged with 70 different cases in all, including cross-dressing and heresy, the most prominent of the lot. Many different people came to her defense with logic and evidence of legal approval, but in the end, Joan was condemned and sentenced to death. She was tied to a tall pillar in Rouen, and, at her behest, was given a crucifix by a sympathetic soldier. Joan was burned at the stake, and, after confirming that she hadn't miraculously escaped, burned the remaining part of her body and dumped the ashes into the Seine River. After the 100 Years' War ended, 22 years after Joan's execution, she was retried as a request from an inquisitor general. And her mom. They wanted to know if, 22 years prior, she'd been tried justly. We all know she wasn't, and they'd accumulated enough evidence to martyr Joan and implicate the late Bishop Couchon of heresy. Joan was innocent. Joan of Arc became semi-legendary after her death, and it seemed everyone saw her differently. Demonic, or an unfortunate tool of the crown, or an iconic heroine, or a saint. Eventually, Joan was canonized as just that. A saint. Maybe her life didn't end so well, but man, what a legacy, right?